Now we're ready to start assembling our book. I have my 5 pockets, I have 6 of my hinges, and I've also used the template in the cutting guide to cut out a front and a back cover. And I think you can see that I've inked the edges already on these because in this book the edges of the chipboard will show. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is make sure that we have our pocket oriented with the opening at the top and the side of the seam is facing down. And on each one I just want to make a guideline on the front that is 1 inch from the left edge. And then take one of my hinges, line up the edge with that line we just drew, give that a burnish, and go ahead and repeat that for all 5 of our pages. So you'll have 5 pockets with a hinge and you'll have 1 hinge left over. And you might notice that I have my scoreboard out here, and I find that handy to keep things aligned as I go to put each page on. So I've got this one first page that I've got done in the corner and butted up here, and then I'm going to remove the score tape backing, and then I can keep this next pocket butted up against the bottom here, and I'm just going to take the edge of my pocket up to the edge of my Tyvek there. Now if you weren't using Tyvek, you would have a score line that you could follow. And then give that a burnish. And then you can just follow that same procedure to add all the pages on. Make sure it's the bottom page that's in that corner, and then you have the hinge here. Take your next page and put it on. So I'll do that and then I'll be back. Now when you get all of your pockets together, we still need to add the hinge on the back page, and we'll draw a 1 inch line here, much like we did for the front, and we'll add this hinge on like so, and then we'll be ready to add our covers. Now we're ready to add our covers. And I think you can see that I've labeled them inside front and inside back. The only difference is that I've made sure that I inked 1/2 inch in on the side that is going towards the binding, so that's why they're kind of mirror images. When we put these on, the edge gets lined up with the fold. It won't stick all the way to the fold, but that's what we're going to use to line up. And I find it easier to do this part in an upright position. I can kind of hold on to that fold there and make sure I'm getting it in the right place. So I'm going to go ahead and release my score tape backing and attach this part of the binding to the inside of the front cover. Now you can just do it like I'm doing here and take a little piece at first just in case things don't go the way you want, and then you can line it up down at the bottom first where the score tape backing is still on, and then come up here to the top get that engaged, and then reach in here stand it back up and line up that fold. And then we'll give that a burnish. And then we'll repeat that on the back side so that we have our book put together. So I'll do that and then I'll be back. So now I have the back cover on as well, and this is what we see right now on the spine edge. Those extra folds give us plenty of room for our interactive elements on all of our pages. And so next we'll add pieces A through F. So now we're ready to add our interactive elements to our base book, and some of these we'll add now and some will wait till when we add our pattern paper. And in the cardstock cutting guide on the right side there's a assembly list, and this is where I've decided to add my elements that I've made. You of course can add them anywhere that you would like to. So I'm going to start on page 1 because we won't put the pocket on the inside front here until we've added our decorative paper. And on the front of page 1 I'm going to put an A unit, and I'm going to attach it to the right hand side of the page, so I've got it in this orientation. This pocket A unit is just as tall as the page, and so we want to line it up exactly with the end of the page here and attach this tab. So here's our A unit attached, and of course this tab will get covered with decorative paper. So flipping to the back of page 1, here we say that we're going to use 2 of our C units, and one of them is going to slip inside of the pocket at the top and bring it to about 1/8 of an inch from this outside edge. And then the other one will just sit on the bottom, again 1/8 of an inch from the bottom from the outside of the page, and aligned up with the bottom. So I'll just remove the score tape backing and install those. So here are my 2 C parts installed, and of course we'll eventually have a closure here. And then on the front of page 2 we're going to install a B unit, and this B unit attaches to the outside like so. So here's our B unit installed. And turning to the back of page 2, here we're going to add a D unit, but we're going to wait for that for pattern paper. And then on the front and the back of page 3 we're going to have some F and E units, but again we'll wait for pattern paper. So now we're on the front of page 4, which will be another D unit, and we'll wait for pattern paper. So now to the back of page 4, this is where we'll install our other B unit. And it goes in on the left side of this page. So there's our B unit. And then on the front of page 5, we'll have 2 more of our C units, just like we installed before. And then on the back of the last page, we'll have our other A unit, and it will get attached to this side. So here are the C units attached to the front of page 5 and the A unit. So now I'm going to make some choices for pattern paper, and then I'll be back to continue. Before I add the pattern paper, on some of these pages I want to add some magnets to the interactive elements. You can see here on the A page that I've added a magnet. It's self-adhesive. It's one of these very flat ones, and it's held back from the 2 corners by about 3/4 of an inch. Now before I put the paper down here, I'll want to get that magnet aligned, and so I'm just putting a couple of pieces of cardstock here on top of that magnet, and I have another magnet that has self-adhesive here. And so what I can do is close this up, get it where I want it to be, and then put some pressure on that magnet, and that self-adhesive will help it stick. Now the reason for using the 2 pieces of cardstock was to split my finger in here and hold on to them, so that when I pick this up, these magnets are so strong that sometimes they want to shift around. So now I have this magnet in the proper place, and I can go ahead and put my paper on there. Now I would only put the matching magnet on right before you go to put the pattern paper on, because if you go like this and you don't have something in between, the self-adhesive is not necessarily strong enough to hold it from pulling that magnet up. They're so strong. So here I'm just going to put a couple cardstock in here to protect that. Now I'm also going to do that on the B page. You can see I've already put the magnet in here, and before I put the paper on here, I'll put the matching magnet on, just like I showed you a moment ago. Here on these pages, I'm going to use a different kind of a closure, and so we'll repeat that for this other B page back here in the back, and the other A page as well. So here on the inside front cover, I've put a piece of pattern paper down. I cut it a 1/16 of an inch smaller than the chipboard all around, and then I also had to cut off a 1/4 of an inch on this side, because that's where the hinge comes in. You can see out here there's a little notch part on the chipboard and on the pattern paper, but we don't have that on the hinge side. And then we can take our piece G, this little pocket, and align it where you want. Burnish that, and then go ahead and decorate that with some pattern paper. Now here on the center section, you remember we had our magnet. That's from this magnet that we installed when we put this interactive page in. And you can see that I put some pattern paper on here. But here I also want to add one of these decorative paper clips. And I've cut a piece of Tyvek that I've backed with some score tape, and I just want to see approximately where I'm going to have this so I can cut a slit, because I want to put the bigger part of the paper clip behind the paper and just have the front part exposed. So I'm going to measure here, see where I want my paper clip and where that slit's going to be, and then I'll put my Tyvek in that location, and I'll be back to cut the slit. So I put my Tyvek patch on the back, and I've made my slit here, and then at the ends I've used a 16th inch hole punch just so it kind of closes off those ends neatly. And now I can slip my paper clip in there. And then I'll put some score tape on the back of that, and then it will be a place that I can add some objects on the page. So there's that. And then here, this is the A pocket. And what I've done here is I've got a piece that is, I think it's 4 by 6, and which is a little bit bigger than the A piece. You can see it's hanging off, so I made sure I have some pattern paper on the end. And what I want to do is I'm just going to glue it, put glue down here in a U shape so that it will create another little pocket here on the inside. So those are the special additions for the inside cover and the front of page 1. Now I've turned the page and I'm on the back of page 1 here on the left, front of page 2 here on the right. And on the back of page 1 we have our 2 C flaps. You can see that I've already added some paper to the insides here, and when I added these little squares here, I glued them just on 2 sides so that I would be able to slip a small photo inside of there. And I still have this piece to decorate. And then here on the front I've added my pattern paper to the top but not to the bottom yet. And the reason is because I want to add a magnet here, and I'm doing this one a little bit differently. I've got a chipboard element from my paper line that I'm going to use, and this one happens to have sticky back. I've added a magnet to the bottom here, I think you can see, and now I want to line this with some pattern paper. So I'll put some pattern paper on. So now I have my chipboard piece lined with some pattern paper. I'm just going to pick a spot to put it so it's about halfway down between the 2 pieces. And I'm going to glue it to the top piece here and make sure that it doesn't get glued to the bottom, and I'll let that glue set up and dry. And now that my glue is set up, I'll open this up and I'll just put a little scrap of cardstock here and put a magnet on there. I've got the adhesive side facing up. And then I'll get my pages aligned how I want them to be. And then I'll just put some good pressure on that magnet. And then I can lift up the chipboard and I have my magnet where it needs to be. So now I can just cover this with pattern paper and I'll have a closure for this page. Now over here on the front of page 2 we had our B element. This is the one with the 3 little pockets. You can see I put some little tags in there. These tags aren't finished on the back, so I still need to do that. But you recall we have a magnet sitting in the middle of here, so this page will snap closed. And then I added one of my fancy paper clips, just like I did on the front of page 1 by putting a piece of Tyvek in the back there. Now turning page 2, and on the back we have our pocket D, piece D, that has these two flaps with score tape on them, and I've cut a piece of pattern paper that I want to have on this page, and this pocket is just going to slip over the corner and we'll fasten these tabs down. So get it straight in the corner and fasten the tabs down. And then just add adhesive and put this page down. Now, on both the front and the back of page 3, we're going to have some cascading pages. And to prep for that, I've already punched some holes and made some slits on one, and this is the one that's going to go on the front of page 3, and on the back of page 3 I'm going to do this in a mirror image. Now the first thing I want to do before I cut my slits, you can see here that I have a piece of Tyvek on the back, and so I've cut that here, and this piece is 5 inches long by 2 inches wide, and I'm just going to put it on the top and probably about 1/8 of an inch down from the top, and then centered left to right. Give that a good burnish. So our little cascading folders, this is piece E and piece F, are 3 1/4 inches wide. So that's the length of the slits that we need to make. And I'm starting the bottom one 1.5 inches from the top and 1/4 of an inch in. So 1.5 inches from the top and 1/4 of an inch in from the outside of the page. So this is the one that's going on the front of page 3. So for the back, I'm going to come in 1/4 of an inch here and 1.5 inches down this way. So get this lined up on my mat here. I'm just going to make a dot where that one's going to start, because I'm going to punch a hole there. And then my slit is going to be 3 1/4 inches long, so I'm just going to start my slit right there and come over 3 1/4 inches. And then I'm going to make a dot at the end. Now we want to move 3/8 of an inch up. All of our intervals are going to be 3/8 of an inch up and 3/8 of an inch further in. So if this one was 1/4 of an inch in, the next one it will be 1/4 inch plus 3/8, or 5/8 of an inch in, and 3/8 of an inch up from where we were. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's my 5/8. And now I'll come again and make my 3 1/4 inch slit. And then make a dot at the other end. Now we'll move up 3/8 of an inch again, and this time we're coming in 1/4 plus 2 3/8. So here's our 1/4, 3/8, 3/8, which would be 1 inch. Make our dot. Then make our 3 1/4 inch slit. And make our dot at the other end. And our final slit which would be 1 3/8 inches from the edge. And I just like to line up my ruler so I can see where my 3 1/4 inch will end up. So here's my first dot, here's my 3 1/4, and then I'll make a dot at this end. Hopefully you can see those lines, the beginning and ending dots here. And what I'm going to do with those dots is just take my 1/16 of an inch hole punch and make a hole punch on each one of those dots. So now we have our mirror image cascading sheets. I'm going to work on this first one. And here I have 3 of the E pieces and 1 of the F. The only difference with the F is it has the 1/8 inch tab at the top, and it's the one that's going to go on the top. So and we want to cut the tabs to be 3/8 of an inch because the distance in between here is just 3/8 of an inch. So trim your tabs on each one to 3/8 of an inch. So then we'll feed our tab in, we'll work from the bottom up, feed our first one in, get it positioned so that it's straight. Hold it there and then remove the score tape backing and put it down. And repeat that for the other 3, and I'll be back for the last one. Now our last one that goes on is a piece F that has this little 1/8 inch gusset, and when we slide that one in, we'll just make sure that the gusset is out here on the front. So we'll go ahead and attach that one. And then you've probably noticed that I haven't put the pattern paper on this one yet, and that's because I want to add a magnet to help these all kind of stay in place as the page moves around. So I'll remove some adhesive backing. I'll hold that magnet back about there, and then I can take its partner and it will seek its place here on the back. Remove the adhesive backing and then just let it find its place. There it is. So now these all kind of stay down, and we can add our pattern paper on the top. Now here on the back, we'll want to put some good adhesive score tape across here. This one is just because I put it on the wrong side by mistake. So we'll put some adhesive because these slits are still open kind of here. So make sure you cover up this and here when you go to adhere it to your base page. And then do the same thing for the other side. They just kind of cascade in the other direction. For the spine and for the closure, I'm going to be using twill tape. Now you could use any kind of ribbon that you wanted to. I like to get this twill tape. It's readily available at my sewing store. And I'm going to use 1-inch wide tape on the spine area and 1/2 inch for the closure. You could just use the same ribbon on both sides. And then this comes white, and I just use some Distress Stain to color it to the a matching color for my project. In this case, I used Evergreen Bough. So to start, first we need to make some markings on our covers, and hopefully this pencil is showing up on the camera. I've measured up 1 inch from the bottom, and this is on the spine edge, 1 inch from the bottom, and then because my tape is 1 inch wide, I marked out a 1-inch space that is 1.5 inches long. So I've got a little rectangle here that is 1 inch by 1 1/2, and it's up 1 inch from the bottom. And then I've also spaced out a 1 by 1 1/2 inch rectangle that is down 1 inch from this little notch here at the top, or if you were to measure up from the bottom, excuse me, the top is 5 1/4 inches. And then on the open edge of the book, I found my center of this 6 1/4 inch distance, and my tape is 1/2 inch wide, so I've measured out 1/2 inch by 1.5 inch rectangle that is centered on this 6 1/4 inch side. And then I've repeated the same thing on the back with these 3 things. Those will be our gluing locations for our ribbons. So I'm going to start on the back side because the system I'm using requires doubling up of the tape, and this is very thin tape, so there isn't much of a bulk, but if there is going to be any bulk and any bump, I'd rather it be on the back side of the project. So I've cut for the back side pieces that are 5 1/2 inches long, and then I've got some 1/2 inch rings here that I'm just going to thread onto. I'm threading 2 onto each of the ribbons, and it's important to do this before you glue them on. And you could need 2 rings for this system. You could also use longer ribbons and tie if you wanted to, but I like this because it's very easily adjustable. So now that I've got 2 rings on there, I'm just going to fold the ribbon in half, and then using my gluing rectangle, I'm going to glue each of these sets down and allow them to dry. Now I find it easier to glue one side down so I'm not fighting two sides at once, and then just put a little more glue on the top here and put the second side down. And let that dry thoroughly. And now that these have dried on the back side, we can flip it over. And these will probably be too long, but I'd rather have them too long and trim them. And these just go on in a single layer on the front, the two on the spine side, and then the one on the open side. And again, I'll glue those on and allow those to dry. Now that our glue is thoroughly dried on our ribbons, we can determine how long we want those front ones to be and cut them off. You can see I've already done that with this one. The way this kind of closure works is that you thread the long ribbon through both of the loops, and then when you come back through the ring that is closest to the front. And then you can just snug it up. Now when you trim your ribbon off, it's always a good idea to trim it off at a diagonal. So you can see right now maybe that I've got some ravelies going on, but if you trim it at diagonal, usually you don't have that problem. Now if you haven't dyed with stain and you've got a raveling issue, you could consider putting something like glossy accents or something on the edge. Since I use some distress stain to dye this, I'm using the diagonal method, which I think will work fine. I don't want to put the glossy accents on there. The wet will interact with the stain and might cause some bleeding. So once I get one cut to the length that I like, I can just undo it and measure and see what length to cut this second one. And of course the benefit of having this kind of a spine is that if small and you don't put a lot of photos in, you can snug up the spine, but you can also allow it to grow by just loosening it a little bit, and now the spine can be bigger. And of course I'll repeat the same process over here for the closure side. You might have noticed these sharp scissors sitting over here by my side. These are different from my paper cutting scissors, and I don't think I said that I use these when I cut my ribbon, because the paper cutting scissors just will not cut the fabric. They are not sharp enough anymore. So make sure you use some good sharp scissors when you're cutting your ribbon. And then it will just be a matter of finishing the decorations for the outside covers, both the front and the back.